Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here once again, and today we're going to go through 10 more incredibly overrated Hearthstone cards. So this is episode 2 in this mini-series. Go out and check out part 1 if you haven't already. And remember, these cards aren't necessarily competitive or uncompetitive, it's about how good they are in respect to what people think of the card. First up, the Anubar Ambusher. This card looks a lot better than it actually is. When it first came out, people were experimenting with it. There were a couple tempo rogue decks that people were trying to fit it into because it is a 5/5 minion. The problem is that its death rattle is actually an enormous drawback. If you try to play anything onto a field with this still around, you're just asking for your extra minion to get sapped. In most circumstances, the one extra attack you're getting is not worth the drawback. Number 2, Aviana. This card looks absolutely insane, being able to basically flood your entire hand onto the board if you happen to let it survive for a turn, or if you have it innervate in your hand and it's already turn 10. And yes, certainly with Aviana you can do that, which is an incredibly strong tempo play. However, the problem is that it's completely unnecessary. If you're even playing a game where you have the potential to play Aviana plus innervate plus 3 cards from your hand, then it's probably control versus control, and all you're going to accomplish by dumping your whole hand out onto the field is for you to get brawled or light bombed. There are very few circumstances where playing Aviana at its full capacity is really going to help you win the game that much. Yes, you may be able to kill your opponent in the next turn if they don't have an AoE removal, but at the same time, if you all in like that, you can instantly lose the game as well. And remember, that's only if you get to play it in its best case scenario and not just as a 9 mana 5/5, which is really sad, honestly. Number 3, Baron Rivendare. This card looked like it would be a centerpiece in many Death Rattle decks, being able to get a huge amount of value out of those Death Rattle effects, much in the same way that Brand Bronzebeard does. However, the problem with Baron Rivendare is the amount of setup it requires for you to get any real value out of playing this card. The only real example where this card's effect ever really came into play and be good was with the Dread Steed, being able to flood an entire board with 4 or even 6 Dread Steeds at once. Number 4, Bolster. In a Taunt Warrior deck, this card is actually pretty good. Giving +2/+2 to multiple minions is a lot of value, and it almost made Taunt Warrior a thing. However, I think a lot of people took a look at this card and were like, wow, this just makes Taunt Warrior amazing. It's totally worth building a deck of pure Taunt minions in order to play this card. And the reality was that was pretty wrong for the most part. There just aren't enough insanely powerful taunt minions like Sludge Belcher in the game to really justify replacing all or 80% of the minions in your deck with taunt minions just so that Bolster can actually work. Beyond that, expecting 2 minions or more to survive on the field at one time so that this buff spell can be effective is a little bit of a stretch, because taunt minions are also usually a bit more expensive than your average card. It's one thing for a zoo-style deck to expect a few minions to survive on the field when they're playing cards like Haunted Creeper for 2 mana, which is effectively 3 minions, but when you're paying 3 mana for a 3/4 Monkey Taunt or a 4 mana for a 3/5 Sentient Shieldmaster, it's a little bit harder to pull that off. And no, Target Dummy does not make Taunt Warrior a thing, I'm sorry. Number 5, Magus. This is one of those legendary minions which I really wanted to actually work properly. It's a 6/8 for 8 mana, which means that it's not BGHable, and the effect it has the potential to gain you a lot of value in the late game, basically being able to shut out other late game decks through pure card advantage. But the reality is, in 90% of the cases where you actually play Magus, you're going to get maybe 1 extra card at most. Getting 2 extra cards is very rare. In order for Magus to draw you 1 extra card, you need to play it as a 8 mana spell, and then probably turn 9, turn 10 is when you actually play the Magus, and then you Power Word Shield it. Or if you were playing a Shaman deck, which is where I've been most recently trying it, you could Ancestral Knowledge and draw 4 cards instead of 2, which is pretty good, but to get to that circumstance is a little bit tricky. It's not just the kind of card where you can just play it and expect to gain a bazillion cards. You have to have an empty hand so that those cards mean something, and you need to have kept on to those card draw cards until the late game, not only to have survived until the late game, in order for Magus to actually do anything. Otherwise, it's just a 8 mana 6/8 that basically does nothing when it comes out. Trust me, I want Magus to be good. it's just hard to argue for its place in a good deck. Number 6, the Dragonhawk Rider. A lot of people grab this card in Arena, and it's not an atrocious card. I mean, a 3/3 for 3 mana is okay, but I think people overvalue its Wind Fury effect. Going for pure damage is rarely how you win the game in Arena, and beyond that, in order for him to even have Wind Fury, you first have to trigger the Inspire effect, which usually means you slow down your game. All in all, the people who try to play really greedy with it, trying to go for that Wind Fury effect instead of focusing on controlling the board by playing better cards, usually get punished in the end. Number 7, the Steed. Going back to Baron Rivendare, this is also a card which a lot of people were overrating and some people actually were underrating, but I would say for the most part it was an overrated card. So it's a 1/1 for 4 mana, which is absolutely atrocious, but you would think it's pretty good with the ability to play cards like Power Overwhelming, to play cards like Sacrificial Pact with it, and those cards do work okay. They did make it into a Steed Baron Rivendare deck, which does okay for itself. However, in reality, although the combo is cool to pull off, it's not really that insane. It only really wins you games against, say, a Control Warrior. They can't really do anything. I wouldn't even say so much a Control Priest, because they can always Cabal Shadow Priest your 1/1. And it's overall pretty weak against aggressive decks who will just laugh at your 1/1 and continue to go face. So just because a card gets you infinite value like a Steed does, or like a card I prefer, a New Barak does, that doesn't mean it's going to win you the game. People always have other options than trading for your minions, and if you have just a 1/1, they're just going to completely ignore it. So outside of playing cards like Power Overwhelming, all you really get by having a Steed or 2 on the field is a couple extra ping damage a turn, which is nice, but is it really enough to justify playing that deck over something like Handlock, Reno Lock, or Standard Zoo? Number 8, Enter the Coliseum. Now, I might be in the minority of people who actually thought this card had some potential, but if you thought this card was any good at all, oh boy, you were pretty wrong, and I was pretty wrong too. Enter the Coliseum is nowhere near as good as Brawl, and that's even if they costed the same amount of mana. Leaving your opponent's highest attack minion up kind of defeats the purpose of Brawl in the first place, because usually you want them to be left with the crappy minion and knock out the Dr. Boom or something like that. But in this case, it's just like, okay, so I killed 3 of your 1/1 tokens, and now you still have your Dr. Boom on the field. And it's like, wait, wasn't a 6 mana card actually supposed to do anything? And on top of that, it wipes out your own minions too. So unless you're playing Nerubian Eggs or something strange like that, this card is going to hurt you as well. I think if this card had a cost of 4 mana, it would be pretty reasonable as like a bad Brawl that costs 1 less, another AoE for Paladins, but 6 mana, playing this card is asking you to lose the game. It doesn't do nearly enough for what you're paying for, and in many cases, it's just a card that's unplayable because it doesn't do really anything on the board that matters. I wanted it to be a good card, it's just not. Number 9, the Ethereal Arcanist. There's a surprising number of mage players out there who kind of try to all in on secrets, playing Mad Scientist and the other 3 mana mage, the Kirintor mage, that helps you throw secrets out on the field quicker. Which isn't the worst idea in the world. It's not really a competitive deck, but there's something to it. But to base a whole deck around Ethereal Arcanist usually doesn't work out that great. Yes, this card can spin out of control, but so can many other cards in the game. I mean, Shade and Axiomus basically does that without requiring you to have secrets on the field. Of course, that's with the stealth and growing half as fast, but still. To put way too many secrets in your deck is dangerous because secrets played from the hand are not really particularly good for a mage. And in most cases, when you do play the Ethereal Arcanist and you have the ideal situation where you have a secret on the field, it's really just going to get removed as, well, you played a 4 mana 5/5 that was threatening enough to maybe ask for a fireball from your opponent, but in order to do that, you had to make your whole deck kind of bad. The more viable secrets are, the better Ethereal Arcanist is going to be, but don't make the mistake of thinking that an Ethereal Arcanist is good enough to make the entire deck based around pure secrets. It doesn't work out well. Number 10, and final card for today, the Fencing Coach. A 3 mana 2/2 battlecry, your next hero power, costs 0. Now, this card in itself is okay, But I guess some people were thinking that it was good enough to really play in Constructed, but the problem is that a hero power is really weak, and a 2/2 for 3 mana is very, very weak. So all in all, if you were going to play Fencing Coach, you would have to get some really cheesy effect off of it. Like for instance, if you played Fencing Coach and your life tap is a Warlock with 0 mana, I guess you could churn 8 Magus life tap and draw 2 cards instead of 1. But generally speaking, there's not much to abuse in the game out of reducing the cost of a hero power. Usually it's like, yeah, okay, so the next turn, you can play your hero power and then play another minion, but it's not really enough to justify making your turn 3 or any turn in your game suck by playing a 2/2 minion. People thought it would be pretty decent in Warlock, and out of all the classes, Warlock's probably the best deck to play the Fencing Coach in. However, the Fencing Coach just wasn't good enough to make it into any decks in the long run. It's just simply outclassed by everything else you can play. So that's it for today's video on 10 more incredibly overrated Hearthstone cards. I've been Dark Skeleton. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and if you really liked it, you can go check out my Patreon at patreon.com/darkskeleton and throw a couple shekels my way. And until my next video, I'll see you then.